Welcome to the program. Today we will learn about psychoanalysis for managers. Let's have a look at what will you learn. In the following slides, an overview is presented of the basic psychoanalytical insights into organizations that collectively reinforce the reasons why organizations should concern itself with psychoanalysis. It highlights the different psychoanalytically informed approaches that have been adopted thus far in the organization literature and then raises some issues related to those who seek to use psychoanalytically informed insight to make interventions and manage organization dynamics. Questions such as these will be addressed. What can psychoanalysis teach the management of organizations? What can psychoanalysis teach the disciplines which systematically study management and organizations? Can psychoanalysis contribute to better run, better managed, happier, healthier organizations? Now let's understand what is psychoanalysis. Among the many competing systems of psychology, psychoanalytical psychology, or Freudian theory as it's popularly called, has exercised the greatest influence on the modern mind. Primarily formulated by Freud and further elaborated by his followers, psychoanalysis has over the years progressively extended the range of its usefulness. The basic psychoanalytical approach consists of three elements. They are the existence and importance of unconscious process in the individual psyche, the importance of the individual's sexual drives, and the great importance of childhood experiences. Freud's model divided personality into three mental provinces: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is the source of instinctual drives and is the first structure to appear in infancy. The id operates on the pleasure principle, engaging in completely selfish and pleasure-oriented behavior, concerned only with the immediate gratification of instinctual needs without reference to reality or moral considerations. Although the id can generate mental images and wish-fulfilling fantasies referred to as the primary process thinking, it cannot undertake the realistic actions needed to meet instinctual needs. The ego mediates between the demands of id and the realities of the external world. One of the basic functions of the ego is to meet the demands of id, but in such a way as to ensure well-being and survival of the individual. The ego's adaptive measures are referred to as secondary process thinking, and the ego operates on the reality principle. As a child grows and gradually learns the rules of parents and society regarding right and wrong, a third part of the personality gradually emerges from the ego, that is, the superego. The superego is the part that concerns what is right and wrong. It is essentially what we refer to as the conscience. As the superego develops, it becomes an inner control system that deals with the uninhibited desires of the id. Freud believed that the interplay of id, ego, and superego is of crucial significance in determining behavior. The mixture of the three elements, that is, the id, ego, and the superego, in an individual's character structure depend upon constitutional, developmental, and environmental factors and are different for each individual. Now let's learn about ego defense mechanisms. Anxiety is a warning of impending real or imagined dangers, as well as a painful experience, and it forces an individual to take corrective action. Often, the ego can cope with objective anxiety through rational measures. However, neurotic and moral anxiety, because they are unconscious, usually cannot be dealt with through rational measures. In such cases, the ego resorts to irrational protective measures. These are referred to as ego defense mechanisms. These defense mechanisms discharge or soothe anxiety, but they do so by helping a person push the painful ideas out of consciousness, rather than by dealing directly with the problem. Let's learn about some of the characteristics of defense mechanisms. First, they operate automatically and unconsciously. Second, they are not negative responses. Third, each person only uses a few selected mechanisms which can reveal a great deal about them. Fourth, they result in a distorted view of reality, although some are more adaptive than the others. Now let's learn about the different types of ego defense mechanisms. The first ego defense mechanism that we will discuss is repression. This is the mechanism which prevents painful or dangerous thoughts from entering into the consciousness. However, repression of thoughts does not mean its end, for it continues to operate in the unconscious and sometimes breaks through to consciousness under the disguise of a lapse in memory or a slip of the tongue. An example of this would be, in organizational situations, the subordinate's occasional vicious impulses towards his boss are denied access to awareness. The next defense mechanism is regression. Regression is when a previously acceptable motive now becomes unacceptable. The individual in this situation regresses, that is, he retreats back to behavior which is characteristic of his early period of his childhood. For example, in organizational situations with an especially threatening superior, one can see the operation of this mechanism in the subordinate's unconscious repetition of the behavior patterns of his childhood, which had been successful, say, in the appeasement of his angry father. The third defense mechanism is projection. This takes place when an individual attributes to others motives that he himself possesses but which would be found unacceptable if brought to his conscious awareness. One's own undesirable traits are thus projected onto others. An example of this would be a subordinate who constantly comes to an executive and warns him about the disloyalty of other subordinates might be unconsciously projecting the fear of his own disloyalty to the same superior. The next defense mechanism is reaction formation. This is a defense in which an individual adopts conscious attitudes and expressions of behavior which are the complete antithesis or the opposite of the original repressed motive. An example of this would be, in organizational situations, a leader may dislike his team member for his inability to complete certain tasks on time, but behaves in a completely opposite manner and treats him with kindness. It is believed that reaction formation develops as a way to cope with the pressure and stress caused by the original feeling that they have identified as being bad. The fifth defense mechanism is displacement. Displacement is discharging pent-up feelings on objects less dangerous than those arousing the feelings. This means, suppose an individual has aggressive feelings towards another person who is very important to him. Since these aggressive wishes cannot be vented on the other person and have to be represented, the aggression, instead of being directed towards a particular person, is displaced onto someone else. The next defense mechanism that we will discuss about is denial. Here, the individual denies a reality which might seem threatening to his personality. Thus, the news of the death of a friend or relative which brings the threat of death much closer to us frequently evokes an almost reflex response, such as, "Oh no." Denial is basically closing of the eyes to reality. An example of this would be a business owner who denies that his business is failing despite declining profits. The seventh defense mechanism is rationalization. Rationalization is where the individual tries to disguise an unacceptable motive into an acceptable one. This is one of the most widely used defenses, especially in cultures placing great emphasis on logic and reason, where an individual is constantly called upon by others to offer a rationally or morally acceptable reason for some aspect of their behavior. An example of this would be an aggressive motive like "sack everyone" can be rationalized under an altruism for the good of the organization, of course. The next one that we will look at is identification. Identification is when an individual adopts behavior and attitudes of a person who threatens to arouse his intolerable anxiety. Like other mechanisms, identification functions unconsciously and automatically, the individual being unaware of the fact that he is adopting the attitude and behavior of the other person to minimize the perceived threat. An example of this in organizational setting would be the unconscious mimicking or copying of certain gestures of an authority figure. The last defense mechanism that we will look at is isolation. The defense mechanism of isolation can lead a person to separate ideas or feelings from the rest of their thoughts. In distinguishing an emotion or impulse from others in this way, a person attempts to protect the ego from anxieties caused by a specific situation. An example of this in organizational situation would be of a person with a particularly stressful job who may use isolation to separate their work life from their family life, avoiding the stress affecting their relationships. The use of the above defense mechanisms that we have discussed does not necessarily indicate disturbances in personality, since they are employed by all healthy egos. It is only an excessive use of these mechanisms that blocks self-awareness and leads to an impoverishment of the personality. Now let's move on to the topic of stages of personality development. Human development takes place in a series of distinct stages. In Freud's view, the end product of this development, that is psychological maturity, depends upon a successful integration of all the stages of childhood. The developmental journey can sometimes go wrong or be unsuccessful in the sense that the individual is unable to give up the gratifications associated with one stage and proceed further to master the next stage. In such cases, the individual remains fixated. Freud maintained that an infant who does not receive adequate oral gratification may, in adult life, be prone to excessive eating or other forms of oral stimulation such as biting fingernails, smoking, or drinking. Freud characterized 5 psychosexual stages of development that we all pass through from infancy through puberty. Each stage is characterized by a dominant mode of achieving libidinal pleasure. Now let's discuss each stage in detail. The first stage is the oral stage. During the first 2 years of life, the mouth is the principal erogenous zone. An infant's greatest source of gratification is sucking, a process that is necessary for feeding. The disturbances in the oral stage may later result in characteristics like undue pessimism, hostility and suspiciousness, withdrawal of interest in other persons or ideas, and excessive greediness and dependency. The second stage is the anal stage. From ages 2 to 3, the anus provides the major source of pleasurable stimulation during the time when toilet training is often going on, and there are urges both for retention and for elimination. Disturbances in this stage often lead to personality traits like stubbornness, miserliness, and an overemphasis on cleanliness and orderliness both in language and in thought. The third stage is the phallic stage. From ages 3 to 5 or 6, self-manipulation of the genitals provides the major source of pleasurable sensation. An unresolved fixation in the phallic stage could lead to egoism, low self-esteem, shyness, worthlessness, and men that treat women with contempt. The sense of initiative is the normal development gain from this stage. The next stage is the latency stage. From ages 6 to 12, sexual motivations recede in importance as a child becomes preoccupied with developing skills and other activities. The danger in this stage lies in the child developing a sense of inferiority if he despairs of his ability in learning the skills expected of him in his specific culture. The fifth and the last stage of psychosexual development is adolescence. Adolescence is the transitional stage from childhood to adulthood that occurs between ages 13 and 19. It is marked by rapid psychological maturation and increased glandular activity. The main psychosocial task is the gaining of the sense of identity, which includes the choice of a career and definition of one's past and expectations of the future. The mastering of the psychological crisis of this stage, often called the identity crisis, is a precursor for adulthood and maturity. These were the 5 stages of psychosexual development in an individual. Now, let's summarize what we have learned so far. We've learned about the psychoanalytical approach and the 3 elements of psychoanalytical approach, that is, importance of unconscious processes, importance of individuals' sexual drives, and the great importance of childhood experiences. We have also learned about the personality structure, which is divided into 3 provinces: the id, ego, and superego. The id is the reservoir of instinctual drives, the ego is the rational part of the personality, and the superego is what is referred to as the conscience. We have also learned about ego defense mechanisms, which are basically the mechanisms that soothe anxiety rather than coping directly with an anxiety-provoking situation. Under this, we have seen the different types of ego defense mechanisms. They are repression, that is preventing painful or dangerous thoughts from entering consciousness; regression, retreating to an earlier developmental level involving less mature behavior; projection, which is attributing one's unacceptable thoughts or motives to others; reaction formation, which is preventing the expression of unacceptable desires by behaving in a way that is completely opposite to one's true feelings; displacement, that is discharging the pent-up feelings on objects which are less dangerous than those arousing the feelings; denial, which is denying the reality which might seem threatening to one's personality; rationalization, using contrived explanations to conceal or disguise unworthy motives for one's behavior; identification, that is adopting behavior and attitudes of a person who threatens to arouse his intolerable anxiety; and isolation, which is characterized as a mental process involving the creation of a gap between an unpleasant cognition and other thoughts and feelings. Lastly, we have also discussed about the 5 stages of psychosexual development. The first stage is the oral stage, where the mouth is the focus of stimulation and interaction. Here, feeding and weaning are central. The second stage is the anal stage, where the anus is the focus of stimulation and interaction. Elimination and toilet training here are central. The third stage is the phallic stage, where the genitals are the focus of stimulation. Here, gender role and moral development are central. The fourth stage is the latency stage, where the energies shift to physical and intellectual activities. Here, alternate gratification is central. The last stage is the adolescence, which is marked by rapid psychological maturation and increased glandular activity. Here, developing mature sexual relationships is central.